How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? What's the real truth about Citizen Kane?
It'll probably turn out to be a very simple thing.
Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. I'm Parker.
I'm Max.
And welcome back to another episode of Better Than Citizen Kane, the highly subjective show where we look at a movie and ask that titular question. Because when every movie ever made is a reasonable contender for the title of greatest film of all time, you have to wonder, better than Citizen Kane.
Citizen Kane was a 1941 film, often referred to as the greatest film of all time. After 61 episodes discussing this topic, Parker was well aware of the show's pitfalls as a creative output, but carried on anyway. He would later move halfway across the country, further distancing himself from Max, his co-host.
So get ready to hit the road with two guys you don't know and a very special guest, because this week we're joined by a friend of the show, José Valle Jr., writer and director of such films as Marcelo Dreams of Charles, The Song of El Sabon, and for the sake of honor, as we dive into his pick for this week, Alfonso Cuarón's Tu Mamá También, 2001.
Max secretly felt the intro for this episode was too wordy, featuring too many film titles for people to follow. He often wondered if it was the quality of his intros that pushed Parker away, but never felt he could bring it up. Within a year, they would hardly speak to one another. Another year after that, they didn't speak at all. Max and Jose remained friends, though.
I'm sorry? I'm sorry. How do you, Jose?
I don't like this oracle nature of what's going to happen to Max and I. This feels bad.
Like, I loved it in the movie, but why? How do you know?
Jose didn't really care much for their thoughts on the subject. He was being artsy, and that was good to him.
I see.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That makes sense.
Well, Jose, welcome back to the show.
I'm so happy to be back.
Glad to have you.
It has been far too long.
It's been 2 years almost exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
I think it was June 12th of 2023 the last time you were on. And thank you for humoring me with my funny little narration joke.
Yes, of course.
That was actually a little peek behind the scenes, everybody. That was written.
Yeah.
Max fancies himself a writer.
Yes.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to...
What do you think, you're a writer? You think you're a writer? What are you going to write about? You can't write until you know life. That's a reference to the movie.
To the movie, because he wants to be a writer.
Oh, yeah.
Because his cousin says that to him.
Right.
And his cousin sucks.
Yeah.
I'll say this. After having, and we'll just get this out of the way. We'll get the and or of it all right out of the way, out of the top.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've only seen Diego Luna in his Star Wars stuff. I don't think I've seen him in anything else. Coming back to this, I was like, oh, he's acting even in this. Like, he's been good from the beginning, because it doesn't feel like he's like young Diego Luna. He's doing something specific. There was only like 1 or 2 lines where he said something a little angry, and it kind of got a raspiness to it that I was like,
you were like,
Cassian?
Let's fucking Cassian.
But
overall, like, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more, but like, these two guys, they're best friends since they were born.
Yeah.
They are in this movie together, and they're both so good.
I mean, I think people talk about like Affleck and Damon as like this bromance, and it's great. I love it. I just rewatched Good Will Hunting, and I'm just so happy for both of them that they're in love. But like, Gael Garcia Bernal and Diego Luna are like, that's like the blueprint, for just like a healthy male friendship that has like spanned decades, and they're just the best. And I love seeing them together. They recently did a show called La Máquina, which was a Hulu original. It was about like an aging boxer. It was them two and Isa Gonzalez. It was great. And I was just the show was fine. I just liked watching them together, Yeah. It was just good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jose, we wanted to have you back on the show. We've talked about it before. We thought about bringing you back around spooky time.
Yes.
But mainly I was just like, congratulations. You just graduated from school.
Woo-woo.
Congratulations.
Goodness. I got a real degree, guys.
Huge.
Woo!
Yes.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And so I was like, hey, Jose's schedule just cleared up. Let's have you on. Remind the listeners, Jose, your history with Citizen Kane, and also your history with this movie. But let's start with Kane.
Yes. So, I mean, Citizen Kane is like you guys have talked about, like your listeners know, right? It's this movie that's often like, greatest film of all time. And so I think the first time I ever watched it was in I think it was called like History of Cinema class when I first moved to LA, and I was down at Biola University. And so uh, it was me and like 20 other people in an auditorium at like 7 p.m. and I watched Citizen Kane for however many hours that movie goes. Felt like forever. But I was blown away that I was like, man, because for years I was always like, can't be that good, you know, like it's an old movie, can't be that good. Yeah, no, it's pretty great. It's phenomenal. I mean, the what it represents for the industry, like the strides that it took and the way it pushed things, and it really got to me. And it's it's a movie that like when I often find myself the person that when someone's like, I mean, Citizen Kane's overrated, it's not that great. I'll be like, no, 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 now hang on there, okay, put some respect on my boy Orson's name. So yeah, that's kind of my history with it, where it's like I think I respect it and I revere it for what it is. It's not a movie I often rewatch. I was actually thinking about this that I'm like, I think that's the last time I watched it had to have been before we recorded the last episode, so like
Mm.
2022 maybe. Like I rewatched it maybe a year after I watched it in that class. So not one I often go back to, but
Yeah. Well,
good movie.
welcome to the Citizen Kane might be overrated show.
Yeah.
Things have changed since you were last here, though. I mean,
Yes.
I have warmed to the movie quite a bit. Parker has remained resilient in the face
Mhm.
of,
I stay grounded in my ways. I'm stuck in my
Yeah.
ways.
yes.
I did re-listen to a couple of episodes. I just listened to your 2001 episode that you guys just put out in preparation.
Ooh,
Uh,
Good episode.
oh,
oh, gee.
okay.
Yes.
How'd you think?
It's the big ones like Stalker in 2001,
Hmm.
not less so Stalker, but like 2001 and like what's another one that we did, Parker? We were like, uh-oh, like
Titanic had us a little
Titanic.
worried.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but I don't know. I think we're pretty fair on this show. So hopefully Jose won't have to be
I think
like,
you
now
guys
hold
are.
on.
Yeah.
But if you
Now hold
want
on
to,
there.
feel free.
Oh, I will.
That being said, you brought this movie to the show, which I
Yes,
imagine means you like this movie quite a lot.
I do. So I have, part of the reason I want to go into film and part of like my mission is to empower Latino voices in cinema and uh, sort of build these bridges that I feel aren't very existent now for people like me. And so I've been on this sort of inspired pro Mexican cinema mood for like the last 2, 3 years because I just did my thesis film, which was about Mexican culture and Mexican identity and Mexican American identity, and so I've been just on a kick of watching movies like this, and Amores Perros, Perfume de Violeta, like all these stuff, um, and this is a movie that is when you talk to filmmakers is often up there as like one of the greatest films of all time. And I have a long history with it. I was thinking about this morning that I'm like, I think the first time I watched this movie was when I was 14 with my parents, which is a
Oh,
great movie to sit down and watch with your parents.
I can imagine.
And I just remember like not paying much attention except for the sex scenes and then being like, whoa, you guys seeing this? And then I think I tried to rewatch it when I was 17,
you tried to.
and tried to, and then got to the sex scenes, and I was like, nah,
And you were like, I'm not having any of this.
yeah, I'm not. No,
No
thank you.
thanks.
And then a distinct rewatch that I remember was right before I moved out to LA, so I would have been like 21, I think, 20 or 21, and I was in my room in the basement of my parents' house, and my dad walks in. I had my blanket up because I was in bed watching the movie. And he walks in and just is standing in the doorway. And it's the opening scene,
Hmm.
of Tenoch and his girlfriend having sex. And he goes, "What are you watching?" And I paused the movie and I was like, "Oh, Tu Mamá También." And he's like, "Oh, good movie." I was like, yeah, 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 wait. He's like, "Let it play for a bit." I hit play and it's just us sitting in silence in a dark room with them having sex and promising not to have sex with each other. And then my dad just sitting there, like hands in his pockets, and he's like, "All right, man." And then he leaves. And yeah, that was a great moment. But No, this is one of my letterbox top fours. Like this movie means a lot to me, both for what it means and what it does for like Mexican identity and Mexican cinema, but also just as a film and like a testament to filmmaking. I think it's incredible. I think it's well directed, written, acted. And it's a big part of like my friends and I's like friendship identity. You know, this is a movie that has brought us together. I have a group of friends and we call each other the Charolastras because of this film. So
That's nice.
Sort of the, white Americans have Goonies.
yes,
And and I was just thinking like there's probably a lot of people out there who are like never done, it.
Yes.
Stephen King adjacent.
Now, I've
Yes.
never seen the Goonies. Is there a lot of sex in the Goonies?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
unfortunately, yeah.
I
Why
was
do you think
unaware.
they're called the Goonies, Parker?
Oh,
Where do you think the term
I
Yeah,
see.
Gooner
Okay,
coming.
that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense.
No, I'm
that
sorry,
makes
I
a
can't.
lot of sense.
I have to clarify. I stand by Goon is a guy who helps the Joker beat up
Oh
people.
yeah. I
will not stand for this reappraisal of what Goon means by the youth.
I always refer to my tall, like broad friends. I always tell them like, you have a great goon body. You would be a great goon. And now that gets me in trouble.
That's you,
you know?
right?
Now people are like, "What did you say? You
You're
can't
like,
say
"Oh."
that." And I'm
Yeah,
like,
we gotta uncancel
wait.
Goon.
Yeah. Because, playing Lego Batman and it was like Riddler Goon,
"Yeah,
Yeah.
Joker Goon, and I'm like,
and now I'm like, that
those are my
guy's
guys.
gooning for the Riddler. Holy shit!
Whoa.
They put that in the game.
Paul Dano's a nice young man.
Yeah.
Uh,
You're telling me those guys that were part of his online group in the Batman weren't gooning for him? Come on.
well, that was an OnlyFans account that he was
Right.
using.
Right. That was the platform that he
It was like
canonically
Gotham's
using.
version of OnlyFans. Yeah.
Only goons.
Is that anything?
Is that anything, guys?
Is that anything, guys?
Guys, I haven't podcasted in months. Is that good?
I do want to say, Jose, I'm really glad that you brought this movie here. I'm really glad that you're here. I can't wait to hear you talk about this because I haven't seen this before. Neither has Parker.
Oh, really?
Until
wow.
for this show. And I feel
That's
like
incredible.
you and I, Jose, we just haven't ever really talked about this movie because I think I just hadn't seen it before.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to hear from you. And also, we don't have we don't have a ton of guests come on, and when we do, they bring a movie. But we talk about things like Shaft, and like I'm sure at some point, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and all these things where it's like, I think we approach it with tact and with respect and with a good amount of research. But it's so much better when there's someone who like connects to the culture of a movie or the identity being explored in a movie. So I'm really glad that you're here and you got to bring it to the show. So just wanted to highlight that. Also, just protect Parker and I from any, assumptions about what
there was a nice little bit of bubble wrap.
Most of podcasting for Parker and I is just qualifying and trying to ensure that no one gets mad at us. So
yeah, that's great. I did laugh when I told my friends. I was like, I'm gonna be because again, we all love this movie, and so I was like, I'm like on set, and I'm telling them I'm gonna be on my friend's podcast to talk about Tu Mamá También this weekend, and they're like, that's great. And I'm like, yeah, it's this podcast called, guests should listen to it. I was like, I was on a previous episode, and they're like, oh, what movie did you bring last time? And I was like, Ratatouille. So I think the jump from Ratatouille to Tu Mamá También is incredible.
We take all kinds. We have a wide spectrum here.
That's my range.
I think Ratatouille did we determine it was better or wasn't better?
I think we just barely said it wasn't.
I think it was just barely under.
But then also, right above Citizen Kane on our list is like Klaus and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. So
which I stand by.
I get nervous every time I say it on television.
I will plant my flag in both of those.
I agree with Puss in Boots.
Since our last episode, I have become more emboldened in my film opinions and going against the mainstream. Like I'm like, I don't care. This is what I like, and I stand by it.
Yes. Lovely.
Pacific Rim is good. I don't care what anyone says.
Pacific Rim is good. Maybe you should bring that next time. Parker, what's your history with this movie?
Mostly just kind of know it by reputation.
Mm.
Was not one that made it into my rotation anywhere during school
Right.
or
This wasn't you when you were 12 in your room watching classic movies on your computer. You weren't.
no, I think little LDS Parker would have been
Yeah.
scared to hell of this movie at 12.
Yeah.
I think it really would have spooked him.
Yeah. So do you remember? So I was just about like, do you remember the first time you?
Yeah, I
It's
mean
last week.
it was yeah,
Yeah.
it was this last week. Which yeah, was a very pleasant viewing and I'm excited to talk more about it. But yeah, no, I had a good time with it for sure.
Me too.
I like you said, obviously the Diego Luna of it all, but I was very excited to see Maribel Verdú in this
Mm.
because I know her from Pan's Labyrinth. And I was like,
Mhm.
Mercedes, hello,
Mm.
hi. Yeah, she's great in that. And
She's
she's great in this.
incredible.
She's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, I saw it for the first time. Again, it has a reputation. I mean, this movie came out in 2001, and
Yeah.
kind of a cursory glance at kind of how its 20th anniversary just passed 4 years ago, and there were like some kind of think pieces and write-ups of just kind of like, oh, and this like changed the lives of its stars forever. Of like
Mhm.
they kind of had this as they carried on, especially in careers in when they would appear in things in America, and Alfonso Cuarón to an extent, of like being like, oh, aren't you from the sex movie? Like, like weren't you in the aren't
the
you
sex
from the
movie?
sex movie? Happy June 9th, everyone. Was that intentional?
Yeah.
Who knows? Anyway, but it's so much more than that, like it has this reputation. And I never like thought like, oh, this movie's just like, it's just like artsy porn. Like I never thought
Mhm.
that. Some people might think that. I don't know. I haven't really
Right.
looked into it, but like coming out of this, I'm like, strangely enough, I'm like, oh, I see exactly how Quaron's career went from here. It's like, of course, he gets
Yeah.
Azkaban off the back of
Right.
this, of like, it's so clear he's so good at working with young talent and like showing the life of kind of young people and young men in particular, that I'm like, yeah, of course, it totally makes sense that it's like when Warner Brothers is being a little more experimental with Harry Potter, they're like, do you want to do this after this? And then kind of the career he's had since has just been really interesting to see. But yeah.
That's
I
a curious
also
aside. Oh, go ahead.
I I also got this movie, the Criterion edition
Oh.
for Christmas this last year. It was the
Ooh,
best Christmas
marvelous.
present I could have gotten.
Hell
Yeah.
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 Love that. Curious aside on that point really quick. Each of you, do you have a favorite Cuarón film?
Yes, I mean, I think previously I would have said Azkaban,
Mm,
Prisoner of Azkaban, but it's this. I mean, this is my favorite Cuarón
sure.
film. I mean, I love all his work. Roma. I mean, when I watched Roma, it like struck a chord. I mean, because that movie's set in the 70s in Mexico, and my parents kind of grew up around that time, and so I was like, I recognize
Yeah.
these aspects from what's been told to me. But this movie for me for
Yeah,
sure.
that totally seems fair. Um, I'm a huge fan of Children of Men. I think
Mhm.
Children of Men is
Mhm.
kind of an untouchable object. I think it's incredible. Just some of the best filmmaking I've ever seen, genuinely. And it like it's one of the few movies that like genuinely can get me like jaw on the floor about a oneer. Like I
Mhm.
like oneers, but sometimes it feels like they are overdone or they're just there without any purpose. Every oneer in that film is load bearing, and I think it's
Mhm.
incredible. So that's
Mm.
probably my favorite out of his filmography. What about you, Max?
Guys, I've seen 3 of his movies,
Yeah.
Okay.
and I haven't seen Roma and I haven't seen Children of Men. So I've seen this, Prisoner of Azkaban, and Gravity. And I think by
Mm,
default it is this.
Yeah.
Obviously, as a kid who grew up in the 2000s, Prisoner of Azkaban holds a special place in my heart. It's
Yes.
it's like, I mean, the thing about the Harry Potter franchise is we all now have a relative that we don't like to talk about.
Right.
But like we knew really well when we were kids, and
yeah.
we're like,
Mhm.
it's just a shame what happened to that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's just how it feels. Where I'm like, obviously, I really like, we grew up together. I really like Prisoner of Azkaban, but
Yeah.
can't really talk
And
about that. And
I always think of it as a Cuarón movie instead of a Harry Potter.
right,
You know,
a good way
right.
of
that's why I
Well,
call
and
it
putting
it,
that's why I call it Prisoner of Azkaban rather than Harry Potter and the
exactly.
Prisoner of Azkaban.
I find it's a lot easier to revisit the films than it is the books for that reason.
Sure,
Oh,
of course,
for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. I remember watching Gravity when I was 13.
I always forget that's him.
And that is him.
Mhm.
And liking Gravity, but mostly being like, wait, George Clooney's a ghost? I was like, I was 13. I wasn't really
Right.
watching. I wasn't paying great attention. I would like to watch Roma and Children of Men and A Little Princess as well, looking to earlier in his
Mhm.
career as well. I've heard that's good. So I think it is this. I think this has kind of become my favorite of his, but I'm really
Nice.
excited to dive deeper. So, um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, Jose, you said you had some supplementary materials that you had to pull up. Do you have
Bonus
any
features with
research, any
Jose.
information you want to share about the
I would
production of this
love
movie?
to.
Great.
I spent like my last semester, just an entire semester, just talking about this movie in my film styles class. So I literally pulled up my
Fantastic.
slideshow and my
Marvelous.
essays
Wow.
just to have it up here.
This is why you get a film student, and this is why you get a guy who hosts a podcast that's mainly research.
Yes.
I don't have to say anything. I'm so excited.
I can tell you a
Parker
little
and I
bit
will just turn
about
our mics off.
Alfonso Cuarón if you'd like.
Please.
Yeah, please. By all
Okay.
means.
So, his full name is Alfonso Cuarón Orozco, because in Mexico we use both last names. And he was born November 25th, 1961 in Mexico City, which again, if you've watched the film Roma, that's set in the 70s in Mexico, and that's based on his life in Mexico City. And it's actually based on his housekeeper's life as well. So he's the son of a nuclear medicine doctor and a pharmaceutical biochemist, which is a wild combination.
Did
I
you
feel.
say a nuclear medicine doctor?
Yes. Don't really know. I mean, I've looked it up. It's very fascinating what that entails. I'm not qualified to speak on it.
Okay.
Only practices medicine for the nuclear family unit is what,
Yes.
obviously.
Oh,
Yes.
well,
see,
Parker
I was
also
just
looked it
like,
up.
yeah, Parker actually studied that too.
Yeah.
No, I was just like, nuclear medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Fascinating.
it was like it's like the
Hey,
50s
it was the
through
70s, man.
70s. So they were like, sure, let's put it in everything.
Is that what it is, though, or is it medicine for like? Okay, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. He's one of 4 children, and he started his career working in television as a technician and then later a director for television. So you got to start in like Mexican TV. And then his big first screen directorial assignment was Solo con tu pareja, which was a sex comedy about a womanizing businessman who, after having sex with a nurse, is fooled into thinking he has contracted AIDS. And so that's a big thing about how like he got this movie, because people remembered him from that and they were like, the guy who made that weird sex comedy is doing another thing? Okay, cool. His first feature that he would produce in the U.S. would be A Little Princess, which is an adaptation of the novel, and that received critical acclaim and 2 Academy Award nominations for cinematography and production design. And then, obviously he was selected to direct Harry Potter and The Prisoner of Azkaban, the 3rd installment, and I would argue it was instrumental in the shift in tone for those films. Like, I know the books take a shift as well, but it does feel like everyone after that was trying to emulate sort of what he did,
Yeah.
and they actually wanted him to come back and keep directing them, and he said, no, I just want to do one. And then of course in 2014, 2014, he became the first Latin American to win the directing Oscar at the I think it was like the 80 something Academy Awards.
That was for Gravity,
The
right?
80th. Yeah, and that was for
Yeah.
Gravity, which is a huge deal because, in case you don't know this, the Oscar statuette is actually modeled after a very famous Mexican director, Emilio Fernandez, the director of like Enamorada and a bunch of other films. He was friends with the man who came up with the statuette's wife, and she called him over to their house to pose for it. And so the sketches based on him were then created into. So the Oscar is a Mexican, but a Mexican didn't win him until 2014, 80 years after the Oscar started. Right. And then, after that, you've had like the 3 Amigos, which is, him and Del Toro and Iñárritu, who have gone on to also win it, all from Mexico.
Right.
And yeah, so that's a bit about his life, and this movie sort of came to be. Um, this film is very fascinating because it's, I think, on a surface level, you're like, it's a road movie. It's about sexuality. It's about, sort of showing the landscape of the Mexican countryside. But this film was written by Cuarón and his brother, and it is about the class divide in Mexico
Right.
and the in 2000. Mexico had an election in which Vicente Fox was elected president, and this was huge because it marked the end of a 70-year rule by the Conservative Party, also known as El PRI, and they pretty much had a dictatorship. Like they had different
Right.
presidents, but it was just a solid grasp on the country, a chokehold, a ton of atrocities committed, just like the destruction of the lower classes. And so this film came about at a time where there was a sort of like renewed hope and optimism of what Mexico could be. And so Cuarón and his brother were inspired to write something about that. And of course, they loved like road trip movies, and they wanted to sort of flip the genre on its head, and thus this movie came about. And that's kind of, I mean, that's kind of like all that. I have other stuff to say, but that's sort of like the supplemental kind of history of it.
Right. Kind of the
it was a
going
big
in.
deal that the leads were cast because they were primarily known from telenovela work, especially Diego Luna. He was known as like a guy from novelas, and so that's like soaps for like
Right.
American audiences. And so the fact that he was like cast in this, everyone was like, "Huh."
Right.
So there
Well,
was
and
like just a sorry.
because
Go
I
ahead.
saw that Cuarón didn't want to cast him initially, and
Mhm.
then Gael Garcia
Yes.
was like,
So
"No, you should."
yeah. So Gael Garcia Bernal had just been in Amores Perros, which is another fantastic Mexican film, directed by Alejandro Iñárritu, and he was instrumental in Diego Luna getting this because Cuarón just felt that if he got a guy who was in soaps, it would like bring
It would feel like a
his
soap.
It would be,
It's
yeah.
like if he cast Joey Tribbiani from Friends in this, you know what I mean? And so, but there's like a bunch of stuff about like how behind the scenes they'd be shooting, and girls would come up to Diego Luna and be like, "Can we get your signature?" Because they knew him from all the soaps and stuff. And he's like, "I'm doing a sex movie," you know?
That's what he would say.
Yeah, he'd be like,
I'm
"Yes,
doing a
but
sex
He would
I'm
movie.
sign
doing a
that on
sex
the
movie."
photo. It'd say, "I'm doing a sex movie, Diego
"Hello, my
Luna."
name is Diego Luna. I'm doing a sex movie."
I mean, that's a great way to spread word and get people in
Yes.
seats, I
Yeah.
suppose, is to be
Yes.
like, if you like me, I'm
It was a
doing a
very, it
sex
was a
movie.
very
Yeah.
avant-garde marketing approach.
Yes.
Right.
But yeah. And then of course he knew that he wanted a Spanish actress because of like the sort of representation of like someone coming over. There's a bunch of like symbolism and meaning behind having the Spaniard in this story, and sort of like both of them chasing after her. Um, and then I don't
Yeah.
remember how I watched the behind the scenes stuff, but I don't remember how that came to be. I think he saw her in something and was like, "Yeah, she's great.
Mm.
We got to get her."
Nice.
And he was like almost 40 when this movie came to be,
Yeah.
also, which is
That's
incredible.
that's what's always so interesting with a lot of these directors is like just because they start to, make headlines in America after an extensive career outside of, American film industry, there's kind of this feeling of like, oh wait, you're older than we think you because
Yeah.
you've been working for much longer. But like once you, kind of really start to appear, and also we're just younger guys, I suppose. But
Yeah. But
yeah,
like going back to your previous point, I think it's like always interesting that his age, because you see the behind the scenes stuff of this and Prisoner of Azkaban, and he like, you wouldn't know it that he's
right.
like a 40-year-old man because he just communicates so well with like his younger actors. And there's a lot of if you've seen like the behind the scenes documentary on this, they talk about how they were like, he was just one of the boys. Like he was just like goofing around with them.
Yeah,
Yeah, great stuff.
great stuff.
Nice.
All right, should we just dive into the summary here a little bit? It feels like we're pretty prepped for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Um, I mean, Jose, do you want to? Should we talk about it? Should I read this? Oh, okay. So as Jose said, these events are set in Mexico in 1999. There is as we alluded to earlier, there is an omniscient narrator who knows the character's thoughts, history, and future evolution, which I loved, by the way.
It's great.
It's such a testament to like what a narrator can be and can do, of like mentioning, there's a moment where he mentions that Tenoch, is that how you'd say? Okay.
Tenoch, yeah.
He like mentions that Tenoch, like, he only ever lifts the toilet seat up at Julio's house with his foot.
Yes.
And then we see him do that when they get to the hotel.
Yes.
And it's just like this way of informing character things in a way where it's like, I don't know.
It's great because he's not used to tell you their thoughts, which I think is almost like what you'd think you'd use a narrator for. I feel like a lesser filmmaker, maybe that's not the right word, but I think another filmmaker would have been like, okay, we'll use a narrator so that we can know what they're thinking, right?
Right.
But in this, he's just kind of like telling you little things that make you think about stuff that happens later. Like he's giving you sort of like subtext.
It almost feels like, I was thinking about this while watching the film, and along those lines of what you're saying, Jose, like the narration almost feels like memory from a future tense. It's kind of them recalling what's going on with hindsight of like, I really love that moment in the car where it's like, yeah, his nanny grew up here and he noted that and he'd never been, but he didn't say anything to anybody. And like, that feels like something that like, if you're recalling this trip, you're like, yeah, and we passed through this spot and I had that thought and like, I didn't say anything about that to anybody,
right.
Yeah, that's great.
But it's also distanced from the characters. Like if it at the end was revealed like, oh, and this is Tenoch recalling this in a book or something, because he's a writer. Like I was almost expecting that kind of like very tight bow on the end of this, of just like, and this is Tenoch recalling this. And like he did research it, but like it's better for the fact that it's omniscient. It's just I think of it as like painting in, like, because like you're saying, Jose, like a worse film would have this be a tool because oftentimes narration is used when the writer or director doesn't trust that the audience can follow along without it, right? It's like, I need to tell you what's happening, I need to tell you what this person's going through and what they're thinking. But this isn't that, because like you're saying, Jose, it's never just like, hey, just so you know, here's what Diego Luna's thinking right now. It's not that. It's like, it does touch on that, like you said, like that example, but that isn't relevant to the scene at hand. It's just like a brief glimpse into it. Almost feels like, it almost just feels like there's a counter melody under the movie of like, we are watching this main melody, but we have this counter melody running through that just enriches it more. To me, it's not distracting.
It feels like either like annotations in a book, or like in the margins of a book, or like almost like script notes that the director would write to be like, oh, so just so I know, by the way, this happened as well. But like you said, it never feels like the narration is there to hold your hand, because the filmmakers don't trust that you're smart enough to understand the subtext. And I think, again, it just reminds me, like when I was writing my thesis film, one of the notes, God bless her, that I got from my professor was add a narration because people won't understand what he's feeling. And I was like, no, they will. I think they will. I think they're smart enough to understand it.
Yeah. So narration, and also my last little thing on the narration is like, it isn't consistent throughout. Like it pops back up when it has something interesting to say.
And it almost like at a certain point in the film, you're kind of like, oh, he's back. Yay. Sure. Like you kind of like,
after my initial like, oh, is my audio? Oh, yeah. Right. After that fades, I go,
yeah, because good. When it comes in, it's like a complete, this is just another like the thought that was put behind this, but like in another film, they would have just lowered the volume of the scene and had the narration over it. But in this, it's complete silence and the narration's happening. Right.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. So this movie is about two best friends, Julio, who is working class, and Tenoch, who is upper class, graduating from high school. Girlfriends leave on a trip to Italy. Like as I said, there is an opening sex scene between Tenoch and his girlfriend. And I just want to highlight the like massive Harold and Maude poster is that her bedroom or is it Tenoch's?
Yes, that's her bedroom.
Because I understand that it's like, oh, that's about a young man whose life has changed when he falls in love with an older woman. Like it feels very relevant to the themes that this movie's kind of presenting. But also I'm just like, So I want to meet Tenoch's girlfriend. I'm like, what does she love about
What's
Harold
her
and
about?
Maude?
Yeah.
I would love to bring that to the
I
show.
I saw your letterbox review for that before I rewatched it, and
Yeah.
then when I rewatched it, I was like, "Holy shit!" It's like, oh, that's a
It's
huge
massive.
poster.
It's really, really big.
And just like the idea of anyone making a poster for Harold and Maude specifically that is so big,
Yeah,
I'm like, that's awesome that someone made that. It's awesome that she found it and hung it up behind her bed.
yeah.
Love it.
I really I mean the choice to start with a sex scene is
Yeah.
incredibly bold,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't feel like this is the thing about that I've because I go back and forth on sex scenes in films, but like in this film, my argument is always that like these sex scenes aren't to be like, isn't this hot? Isn't this cool? It's like, look at how pathetic these two teenage boys are and their understanding of sex, right?
Yes. Well, and also
Um,
look at where Louisa's at. Like,
yes.
look at what she's going through, that
And
she's making this choice as well.
they're shot. I mean, they're just like the way they're choreographed and shot. It's very like almost real, not in a way
There's
that
a
it's trying to.
clumsiness to it.
Yeah.
that I
Yeah,
really
it's not
like.
trying to. It's not trying to be like this is sexy.
No,
It's just like this is sex.
Mhm.
And I
I like
think,
that.
yeah, and I think opening on it is it sets the tone for the film, not just for like the raunchiness that sort of happens, but also like the thing that I focused on this time was the dialogue between him and his girlfriend and how they're swearing to each other that they're not gonna have sex with like he's asking her to not have sex with an Italian and she's like, well, you don't have sex with a Brazilian, and they're like, and I think that establishes a tone for the whole movie of this sort of like comedic kind of witty kind of like real kind of dialogue that's going to happen throughout.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very bold, very smart of him to start
Yeah.
that way.
Well, and also to your point about
And then
it
the
feeling,
narrator.
yes,
Yeah.
to your point about it feeling real, I mean, I was reading that something that Cuarón really wanted to do with this was restrict himself from what he could use before. So he I'm sure you have more information on this, but like he couldn't use any cranes, he didn't want to use any dollies. Like he restricted himself to like, I want this to feel documentarian. Like
Oh, and
that's
I
how I
have
want it
just
to
so
feel.
much to say about the that as well. The cinematography, it's incredible.
Go ahead.
Oh, I
Go.
mean, yeah, it just it the like the shooting it as I mean, so it's all these long shots, right? These long handheld shots, and it's I think there's a really interesting I don't even know what to call it, but like just having it be shot in this almost documentary style, I think gives it like a more it just makes it feel more real and
Grounded.
more grounded. Yeah, yeah. I
Mhm.
think that's the way to say it. And I always I that's like one of the things that stands out so much to me about this film. And then also again, like the mix of the narrator, it just gives it a documentary style.
Mhm.
And I think that's so interesting to do a road trip movie about two horned up teens and make it feel like a documentary, you know?
You
And then
know,
especially with like the political themes and all this stuff that comes in
yeah.
later, like it's yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Do you know what Parker really reminds me of is
Mm.
kind of the approach to Fast Times that Amy Heckerling brought to
Oh,
Fast Times.
sure.
I think Fast Times takes the cake as far as like movie we reference the most in other episodes
Mhm.
of this show. But like that's something where like that's based on a book that Cameron Crowe wrote, which was basically a journalistic uh um what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of
Account.
an account, a journalistic account of high school in California in the 80s. And the movie doesn't lean as documentary in like how it's made, but the approach still feels that way of
Yeah.
like it still
I
feels
can
like
see
we are
that.
just seeing these grounded pieces of teenage life, but it doesn't lean full documentary in like its craft necessarily. But it reminds me of that of like approaching these like teenage kind of what would otherwise be like a teenage sex romp, and
Mhm.
just being like giving it this feeling of like place and where it's set. And now I'm going to mostly talk about You Tu Mamá También to
Yeah.
move away from Fast Times, but like the narrator being almost like a documentary narrator, but within the minds of the characters is interesting. Like a documentary about people's feelings during this trip is interesting and what they were going through and what they were feeling. And then we even jump to like other people of like, these people are forced, a hotel takes
Mhm.
over where they live and he ends up working there as a janitor. And like, it really does have that feeling to it. But I really like approaching teenage behavior as like, we're gonna remove a little bit from like the high emotions of what teenagers are feeling about these sorts of things and look at it more objectively and be like, what does this say about them, and what does this say about the place they exist in, right?
And also, I think shooting an almost documentary, like, I think it makes it, I mean, we'll get into it, right? But I think it makes it hurt more because you feel like these are real people, you know? Like, I think with this film, the thing that always stands out to me is that I'm like, they don't feel like characters. I think like the combination of the narration, the cinematography and the writing, I'm like, it almost feels like this is real, and Cuarón wrote about people that he knew, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like someone told him this story and then he made it. Like, it doesn't feel like it sprung from nowhere.
Yeah.
Which I think, you change the cinematography, I don't know that you fully get that, you know?
Sure.
The visual language of this film is very important to the story.
Totally.
Sorry, just yes. That just had such like I absolutely agree with your point. It just had such the like what film bros sound like when they're talking about things. And it's just like
there's gonna be a lot of that.
The visual language is so important to the story. Yes.
Yes.
Sometimes you just flash out of what you're talking
about. Call me out when I say shit.
No, it was good. It was just like a pause afterward, and it allowed me to feel that. Okay. So the other thing I really like about this is that we have Tenoch, very, being very like, of course, neither of us are gonna fuck other people. And then immediately that is shown not to be the case by him and Gael being like, oh my God, okay, so we're gonna go here and hopefully she's here and maybe we'll get,
oh yeah.
Yeah. And they spend
Two
a lot
of the
of
worst guys, these guys.
Okay, yeah. I mean, they spend a lot of time swimming at the country club. Well, the Tenoch's sorry, I just hit my mic completely with my knee. Tenoch's dad owns or runs a country club that they get to swim in.
Yeah, he's like a member or something.
Yeah, and they also come in it.
Hey, remember, this film was written by two brothers. Just remember that. At certain scenes, two brothers sat down with each other and were like, what if they jerk off in this scene? And then come shoots into the pool.
Because Jose,
I love my brother. I don't think I would sit down with him and write this scene.
Right. But like Jose, in your review from last fall, when you rewatched this, you were like, something that everyone can relate to is like the youth of this movie.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, which parts? No,
the Beatles have often spoken about it. Sometimes you and a friend are in a room together and you
you're
coming to a pool together.
Never.
You guys.
I saw a really good Letterboxd review
high school
about
together,
this.
and we never did that.
Oh,
I'm just gonna say that.
Phew. I saw a really good Letterboxd review about this, which was like two bros jerking off on separate diving boards because they're not gay.
They're not gay,
right?
Right.
They have to have like,
and they're not looking at each other.
No. They have,
and they're
to have
telling
like
think about this woman, think about your cousin, because before they come into his cousin's wife. But before they come into the pool together, there's a wedding reception for Tenoch's older sister, where they meet Luisa, who is the wife of Tenoch's cousin Hano. Is that how you say that?
Yes. Okay. Who's the worst guy?
He sucks. In a movie full of, I'm going to say, pretty unlikable characters across the board, he kind of takes the cake.
Which
is
like,
impressive.
He's a prissy, like, think of what, how like people have a bad impression of writers, like it's prevalent in media, and as a writer I often watch films like that and I go, hey, all right guys, settle down. But then you meet these people and you're like, oh no, that's fair. Like in my notes for this, I wrote, that's what I said, is like, I've met a million Hanos since I've moved to LA. I'm sure. Guys at parties being like, oh yeah, I don't know that I could, like, you're 25, yeah, I don't know that I could be a writer at your age because you haven't really like experienced things. Like, I'm 27 and I feel like I've lived a lot more life.
Parker,
like,
I think, are you gonna share an example? Sorry, I didn't know. No. Okay, never mind. Go ahead.
No, hold on. What was the example?
Paw Patrol.
Yes, I was getting there.
Okay.
The first thing is, I think my favorite version of that joke is in La La Land of the guy who's talking Emma Stone's ear off about his Three Little Pigs adaptation that he's doing.
And it's crazy because I always watched that scene and I was like, this isn't real. It's like a joke. It's like an exaggeration. No, I've met people who are like, and I literally, like a month ago, I was having a conversation with someone who was like, I actually recently found that there's a lot of stuff in the public domain, and I think there's like that's a potential of like a sort of mine for IPs there that you could really develop. Like the next big thing could be a sort of like an adaptation of like a Dracula is in the public domain, and I'm like, please stop talking to me, man. Like, go away.
Absolutely. In reference to what Max brought up, I had an experience a few years ago of getting hired to be a driver for somebody at Sundance.
Great.
And he was like an alumni of the program, knew some of the professors. The professor thought, he's like, well, this might be a good opportunity for you to meet some people or whatever else. So I was like, okay, sure. And I'm driving this guy and his buddies around, and they suck. They suck so bad.
Right.
And one in particular thought he was the hottest shit, like he could not shut up about being a writer. And his claim to fame is that he was a writer on Paw Patrol. And he dangled that in front of all of these girls they were picking up like it was the sexiest thing in the world he could be doing, is writing for Paw Patrol.
I hate that so much.
Max and I have talked about we need to write this guy into a script.
Yeah. Oh, he'll be in there
throughout that entire thing. My face was disgusted.
Yeah, they looked not happy. So Hano is a great example.
Hano's that guy.
Guys. Yeah. Because Tenoch is like, I want to be a writer.
Yes.
And Hano's like, oh, well,
yeah.
Well, maybe
he's like, oh, what are you gonna write about? What are you gonna write about, little baby? Oh, you're a baby. Oh, you haven't lived life, baby.
And then throws a tantrum over some wine spilled on his
because Julio comes over and they Julio does it accidentally, right? Or does he do it intentionally?
It's on purpose.
It's totally
right. It's totally on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
he doesn't tie his shoe, he stands
Another
up.
thing that I feel, we talked about how, like, yes, Julio is from a working class and Tenoch is from an upper middle class, or from an upper class. But Tenoch's dad is a Mexican politician.
Right.
Which I think is very important to the story and to understand where he comes from, because Tenoch is very much like a product of his environment where he doesn't recognize his privilege or his wealth because he's just been afforded it his whole life. And there's a really interesting bit that the narrator tells us that originally Tenoch's name was supposed to be Hernan. And then this was around the 2000s. There was this sort of like big movement of like, it's been 100 or 200 years or 100 years or whatever since founding the country, and there was like a lot of like renewed patriotism for like our Aztec roots. And so because his dad was entering the political landscape, he was like, I'm gonna name my son Tenoch, which is an Aztec hero from mythology. And so that kind of like tells you about the type of person that he is. And so when they're at his sister's wedding, it's like this whole affair because the president of Mexico is there, and it's all about like kissing up to people, and they gotta be nice and like behaved. But again, these two guys are the two worst guys, and so they're just not doing that.
Yeah.
But it also really captures those kinds of guys, like these young men who are like in suits, but they're like smoking and laughing and pointing at people just in the corner. It did feel very true to like people, not me, but like people I know.
I would argue that like the film's central tension is about like the contrasting backgrounds between the two friends, and like they are carefree and then equal to each other, but there's subtle like differences in their class statuses that definitely defines their friendship. Like, and as the journey goes on, it becomes more pronounced. But like, this is something that I argued in one of my term papers, was that they're brought together by this shared belief of or shared trait of the Mexican political system, which is like selfishness, right? And we'll get into that, but I mean, you talked about like him lifting the seat up and stuff. It's like little stuff like that. Like the narrator tells us that when Julio goes to Tenoch's house and he has to poop, he lights a match in the bathroom so it won't smell like poop because he's embarrassed. And then when Tenoch goes to Julio's house, he lifts the seat up with his foot because he's grossed out.
Yeah, doesn't want to touch anything.
They're poor.
Yeah.
And then he does the same thing when he goes to the motel in like a poor area.
Yeah.
And there's a really great moment at the wedding where we see Julio by himself because Tenoch is off talking to Hano, and he's getting a drink, and he tells the bartender like, these fucking guys, huh? The fucking rich people, huh? And the bartender's like, Whatever you say, sir. Because you know, to Julio, he's like, brother, we're the same. But to the bartender, he's like, no, we're not, because you're at a fancy
You're at the
party.
party. Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then they bully Hano, which is great.
They bully Hano. They meet Luisa
because he's a big baby, and then he's like, "Oh, look what they did to my suit, mommy."
Yeah, he throws such a fit about it.
Yeah, and also sounds like he really sucks beyond that too.
Yes, yeah, he's the worst.
Yeah, so they meet Luisa and they mention
he shows off about writing for Paw Patrol. He totally would.
He does.
He would, and he does. It was Hano who was in the car when Parker was driving. It's on it. Yeah. But you know, she's like, "Oh, I'm excited to go to the beach," and they're like, "You don't want to go to that beach. You want to go to this very special secret beach that we go to because we are from around here and we know what it is." Yes. And they clearly make up Heaven's Mouth as a place, and they're like, "Oh, you should totally come with us." And she's like, "That'd be great. Hano would love that." And they're like, "No, well,
womp womp."
They're like, "Who the hell is Hano?"
Right. Any other things to say about the wedding, everybody? I mean, the president leaves before. It seems like, you know, they make a big deal of like, Tenoch, you have to look nice for when you meet the president, but then
and then the narrator's like, the president would leave an hour later, and then he would have to respond to the government like committing an atrocity.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
And to which he would deny it, and then he would fly to Seattle and talk about, I don't know, the importance of
globalization
globalization or something.
Right. Yeah, just like normal president stuff. Like it's normal for presidents to do that
stuff,
you know. Terrible.
Whoa, that was crazy. We said that at the same time. The last thing I want to say is about this scene is that shot when the security guard is like foreground and the two charros ride up like really quickly behind him and they stop.
It was amazing. Shot. Yeah. Just
beautiful. I mean, goodness.
Every once in a while, he'll just be like, sprinkle a little magic in there, and you go.
Every once in a while, Cuarón is like, "What if y'all mind if I cook real quick?" Like, no, please go ahead.
By all means. From there, I think then they masturbate at the pool.
Also, one more again.
Yes.
About this.
Go for it.
Classified. I forgot to mention this. Like, from the beginning, we're showed the advantages and disadvantages of both because Tenoch gets to have openly gets to have sex with his girlfriend. Her mom doesn't mind that he sleeps over.
Right.
And he gets to like enjoy this. Whereas Julio has like quickly tried to sneak it in because her parents don't approve of him as much.
Right.
And he has to like sneak it in before they go to the airport. So like already they're showing you that like one guy gets an advantage over the other guy. Which I think is great.
Didn't even seem fun. At that point, Julio and your girlfriend just don't even...
They don't know what... again, it's like two guys that think they're so good at sex, but it's like, dude, you're lasting like 30 seconds. That's terrible.
Or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, they're back to their shenanigans. Meanwhile, Luisa visits a doctor for some test results. We don't find out what that is just yet.
And that's a great mystery that's kept throughout the film. I'm just keeping you guessing as to what it is.
I thought she might
you that it's something else.
I thought she might have something going on with like a pregnancy or something. Like
well,
I thought that was my thought
pregnant.
Watching it for the first time.
Yeah. Hang on, I'm gonna grab some water if that's okay.
Yeah, go right ahead. It's interesting because I don't know if it's just the way my brain is wired around doctors in film, but immediately I was like, cancer, yeah? And then we got to the end and like it's a weird thing to like touchdown score cheer about. And I was like, yeah!
Parker's like, yeah, I know.
I know.
I'm smart. I'm ahead of you.
I got it. I knew it. I already knew this the whole time.
You guys didn't know?
Get on my level, maybe. I'm wont to do.
As you're wont to do. This is who you are as a person.
A real Paw Patrol myself.
Yeah, a real Hana Paw Patrol. No, I mean, obviously I was also like, she's sick. Right. But I was like, it's gonna go either way. Because they do enough with like her calls with Hano. And then even towards the end, right, when they're with that couple and their family, and she's like, oh, you would be a great mother, you're the perfect age for it. I was like, can she like not have kids? Like,
yeah, there
and like and her thing where like they finish inside of her and they're like sorry, and she's like it's fine, and I was like, can she not have kids? Like that was where I was between the two for sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, my roommate was in here.
Oh, you're fine.
That's okay.
It was my dog.
We were just discussing
how Parker's really smart because he
that's
knew.
Yeah, that's exactly.
He knew it was cancer.
I don't know what
Really?
it is about like the way my brain is wired with doctors in film, but just immediately my brain's like, okay, so it's cancer, and then I kept waffling back and forth. I was like, pregnancy, infertility, like all these other things that were coming up.
Yeah,
and
I was leaning more infertility than
I don't know if we want to talk about it later, but like they throw you for a loop, you know, of like, because then she goes and finds out this terrible news, and then we see her in her hotel room or her apartment, and Hano tells her that he was unfaithful.
Yeah.
And then she's like, why would you tell me this? Why would you tell me this? And she like breaks down. And so like, to me, it was like, oh, she's pregnant. And he just admitted to her that he cheated on her.
Sure.
Right.
And so she's upset.
Right. Yeah. No.
Yeah. All of those crying scenes get fully like recontextualized.
And also, even
Yeah.
throughout the movie are so affecting for me.
Totally.
Like her crying, especially when she's on the phone watching them play foosball.
Yeah.
And there's like the reflection of them playing
That's such a
foosball in the
good
window.
shot.
That's way later in the movie, but like that, like her crying is like it's effective, and her calls with Hano are really solid, well performed and effective. And so she calls. She goes on a trip with them. She's like, I want to come, and then they're like, oh no, we got to figure out where this place is.
I do really
and,
like that little sequence of them just trying to like put this thing together in like
and
an
talk
hour
to
or two.
their really high friend.
And get the directions.
And he's like, so you're gonna
Saba.
go here? Saba, yeah.
I like when all three of them are at his house, at Tenoch's house, and Tenoch's mom is like saying hi to Julio and Tenoch, and then Saba shows up. She's like, oh, hey, Saba. I didn't know you were here. And it's just like that friend that your parents don't like. And they're like, oh, he's here? Great. That's
cool.
Really fun.
That's really, really great. Love that you spend time with this guy.
Yeah. They head off on their trip.
And so they do.
Yep.
You know, they start talking about their friendship. They explained the manifesto of the Charolastras, which is mainly don't fuck each other's girlfriends.
Yeah, mainly.
And we're cool and smoking weed rocks and jacking off rocks. And like it's great how they present it as like, well, it's our manifesto.
It's such a it is such a like teenager's high school version of like having a philosophy, right? Like the one that really gets me is they're like, truth is cool, but nobody can attain it. It's impossible. Like it's a really cool idea.
They definitely read a philosophy book in one of their classes.
Yeah, and that's the thing I love is we kind of missed it earlier, but earlier they're talking about studying literature, they're talking about going to college, they're talking about all these things, and they pass like, you know, this man who was struck by a bus or a truck or what have you, and like those little moments, but particularly like their discussion of everything. I imagine like for a lot of people in the early 2000s in America, I'm sure they were like, Mexico's like the place where you can go to college. Like I feel like there was probably a response of like, wait, it's not yellow there.
Yeah,
everyone's not like poor. Everyone is. You know, like there's a you know, like I just feel like. And even for me, like it's exciting to see this side of like growing up in Mexico portrayed, because in America we don't see this.
No, there's definitely been a lot of propaganda to Americans about what Mexico is like. It's an affluent country. We have our issues for sure, but like it's an affluent country. And I you know, I've been trying to get my siblings to watch more Mexican cinema because I'm like, you've only seen Mexico through the lens of like American films, and it's like it's not all like shacks in the desert and stuff. Like Mexico City is one of like the most beautiful cities in the world. You know,
people really point to Breaking Bad for the yellow tint. It's not their fault. When you get to the border, U.S. Customs forces you to take an ND filter if you have a camera. They're like, that goes on your lens, or you're not getting across.
They're like, we have to maintain this image up. And I think touching kind of on what you said, Max, that like again, it all goes back to like selfishness, right? Is that they have these conversations, but always it has to turn to how does this benefit me,
right?
And so like they're talking about, because Tenoch or Julio's sister is like a big like socialist and like social she's like a protester and
an activist.
That's the word I'm looking for. And they're complaining about the traffic cops, probably these fucking leftists or whatever. And then, it's like, yeah, well, it's their right to come, one of them's like, it's their right to protest or whatever. But then immediately it's like, aren't leftist chicks hot? Yeah, they are. And it's like, it's always, they
Yeah.
start having these interesting conversations and it always skirts to like, how does this benefit me?
Right.
Um, yeah.
The
Yeah.
thing that like it's a something that pops up anytime it pops up in a movie, it consistently just breaks my heart, and it broke my heart in here too. Kind of stitching the beginning to the end a little bit. Like there's in somewhere in this, I don't remember exactly where, there is a conversation about how Tenoch's dad is very adamant that he goes into economics or something. He's like, well, I want to
Yeah.
go into literature. And then at the end of the movie, when you get the recap, and he's like, yeah, I went into economics. Like
Right.
it guts me.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
man.
part really got me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like, yeah, it's terrible. That's just the
But just
worst.
when you talk about this idea of like selfishness, of like
Yeah.
there are moments in there where it's like, oh, this is fully institutionalized within them. This is
Mhm.
fully generational of you are told what it is life is going to look like, and even if you have aspirations outside of that, like eventually you will crumble to that,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, they're on their trip. Talk about their friendship. They boast about their sexual exploits. Louisa's very much kind of like goading them into this of like, well, what is that like? Are you good? Like,
Yeah.
and like
Mhm.
very much humoring them. But in a way where it's clear that she's like, all right, guys, like,
Yeah.
um, and then she talks about her first love who died in a motorcycle accident.
That reveal
And
hits
and
so well.
and like
Her
them,
performance.
yeah, well, and them being like, oh, and then Yahano came and stole you, right? And she's
Yeah,
like, no, he died.
he died.
And like
Yeah.
them having to be like, oh shit.
And
Like,
it's so interesting because like there's a push and pull going on this whole movie of like them trying to be older than they are and her trying to be younger than she is,
mhm,
right? And like there are things about that I want to talk about later, but like it's moments like this that is such a stark distinction of like, oh, this woman is an adult and these two are children.
Yeah.
Like there is in the ways that Hana was being a dick about it, he makes a point of like, well, what were you right about? Like what experiences have
No,
you had yet?
my friends and I often talk about how it's like Cuarón couldn't have made this film when he was 20 because he
No.
hadn't lived life. Like
mhm,
him making, and he's talked about this himself, like him making this when he was nearly 40 was the right time because he'd experienced life. Yeah, and again, I sound like Hano, but it's the truth. I mean, an 18-year-old can't write about love and loss and the intricacies of adult life because they haven't lived it,
Trust me, I tried. It wasn't very good.
Yeah, every time I read the shit I wrote when I was 17, being like, I've never experienced loss, but and it's like, dude, you're 17. You
Yeah.
work at a car shop. Like
And it almost
you're
like
fine.
it's not spelled out, but like their reaction almost makes you wonder like have they experienced death in their life at all?
Right.
Like have they lost a
Yeah.
grandparent? Have they lost anyone? Because
right.
when she brings it up, it's just such a like boom, just this heaviness falls
And
in.
there's there's something so I think Guillermo del Toro has talked a little bit about this, but there's something so Mexican about blending comedy with tragedy, where
Mhm.
it like I've the amount and I think the Cuarón brothers, they do an excellent job at showcasing that fine line because it just to me that scene reminds me of a million conversations I've had with my dad or uncles or grandparents where they tell you the funniest story you've ever heard in your life and you're like that's great and then they end it with like yeah well it was really funny until the house was destroyed by the government and they lost everything and you're
Jeez.
like what
Huh?
Yeah.
and they're like, yeah.
But
Or
but
like
I mean,
my dad and my uncle have this best friend that they grew up with. His name is Mango. That's not his name. That's his nickname. But like they'll tell me these great stories. Like I was over at my uncle's house not too long ago, and he's telling me the story about him and my dad and Mango got up to all this stuff, and yeah, he ends up by being like, yeah, well, it's it's a shame because Mango's like a crippling alcoholic now, and he's like, and he kind of lives on the streets, and it's just like, dude, what? Like maybe open up
Mhm.
with that,
yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
to me, it just
that's
it felt like
something.
a very yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
No.
But that's something that the movie is doing consistently, especially with the narrator being there. Like, they drive past this accident that happened and you see the man's head, he's bleeding out into the street.
Yeah.
And, they touch on, oh, Tenoch is, he never, like, he sees the hometown of his housekeeper that he's known since he was a kid, and he never even really thought to,
Who
like, ask
even
her about
called
it.
mom at a certain point.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, like, you get to the end and you have all these things of, like, explaining what happens with, with the fishing family at the end.
Yeah.
Just constantly touching on, like, there is tragedy that has happened, there's tragedy around them, there's tragedy that is coming. And because of their kind of place in class and in society, they're kind of able to drift through it without really thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you think about when Louisa gets the little plush, what is it, like a monkey? What is it? The little plush toy from that old woman, and it talks about how, like, well, that was her daughter's and her daughter died. And, like, all of this stuff, like, it's just constantly around them, but they're not engaging with it, they're not seeing it, but we are privy to it because the movie's trying to make a point by comparing and contrasting these ideas.
And I also think that's why the road trip landscape is so genius, because it not only do you see the characters grow as the trip goes along, but you are also, like, being put face to face with the disparities in between the classes in Mexico. You go from Mexico City, which is an affluent city, urban landscape, to, like, these, like, rural destinations that are, like, on the brink of collapse under, like, the strain of the economy and the these laws that have been, like, choking them, and as you get to see that as it goes along, and you also get to see their, like you said, like, their kind of blindness to it because of the privilege they've been afforded. Even Julio, who is from a working class, but, like, his lack of privilege is nothing compared to their complete lack of privilege. Or, it's
I do like that. Well, okay, let's get there. I'm just gonna breeze through this a little bit more, and we'll talk about things within this. If I can just read this paragraph really quick. Luisa leaves the message on Hano's answering machine, explaining that she has left him. Throughout the trip, again, like we said, she cries a lot of the time, some of which are accidentally witnessed by the boys, like in their first hotel room. They go and kind of look in at her. On one of these occasions, Tenoch enters the motel room. Well, okay, I don't want to get there yet. I'll just say this: at a certain point, their engine has trouble, their tires have a problem too, their car breaks down. I have something to say
about that scene. Yeah,
and they get. I just want to say this right now because it's relevant to what you're talking about. They get to this place, and I really like that Julio's the one who talks to this old man, and this old man gives him the hat.
Yes.
Whereas, like, Tenoch never interacts with anyone at any of the places that they stop in, really, right? Yeah. Like, is he the one who gives the money to the guy at the restaurant who hands out the hat?
Yes. I think so.
But, like, it's interesting to look at.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, because you see that to Tenoch, the people from, these, like, indigenous people, these people from the countryside, he only sees them as servants. Like, he only sees them as people who are in service,
right? Or
and
people
that's why
who need money,
so that's why he's not, like, that's why he's like, oh, Julio will handle this with this guy, because that's like, I think in a sort of sense, it's almost like beneath him to like interact with them. Again, it's like his housemaid brings him food to him while he's on the couch before Luisa calls him, and like treats him like a child.
Like, still, I mean, it looked a little like a grilled cheese. It may not have been. It looked like
it was a quesadilla.
It was a quesadilla. I just remembered bread and cheese. It looked tasty.
But
a grilled cheese. Come on, Max.
Yeah.
think about it before
grilled
you say
queso. Something. There's a scene right before that, though, that I really love, where they're talking about their sexploits, and the camera switches to see the POV that they're looking out the windshield, and you see a truck of federales, the police, going around them, and then stopping in front of them, and they just start assaulting these campesinos, farm workers, because this was a very prevalent thing. It still is to this day, of, like, them being like, we want a cut of what you've made today, and of the police taking their bribes, their mordidas is what you call them. But, like, while the protagonists are talking about, like, I have fun sex and I do this, in the background you're actively seeing the injustice of Mexican society playing out, and they're unaware of it.
Yeah.
Because they're afforded that.
It's one of Cuarón's strongest suits as a filmmaker, I think, is like creating a world that exists outside of our narrative. And it's part of the reason why I love Children of Men so much, is he feels like at that point he finally levels up his style, that the camera will leave the protagonist and just go hang out with these people for 2 to 3 minutes at a time. And then we'll come back to the narrative. But like the camera will just drift completely away from any main characters and just show us, okay, what's going on in the background? Let's live with these people for a little bit. And you can kind of see like the inklings of that starting here. And it's one of his strengths, I think, that I absolutely love.
Yeah. So before we get to all of that, I mean, they go to the hotel, they go to their kind of their second hotel, and they're showering, and Julio's like, where's the shampoo? I need shampoo. And Tenoch goes into Luisa's motel room. She's been crying, and he's like, I'm sorry, I'll leave. And she's like, no, stay. And then she's like, take your towel off. And then she's like, come here.
Yeah.
And then they have sex. And it's over so fast.
Yeah.
So I have something I want to talk about this, and I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. It's something I've been ruminating on, which is that it is one thing that I rub up against in this film that isn't this film's fault. It's more of like a cultural thing across filmmaking, which is that there is an odd double standard that occurs
I was just gonna say
between when we have young men having sexual activity with older women, older in asterisks in this case, she's probably late 20s, something like that. But like still versus young women having sexual relations with older men in film. And like for a long time, obviously, it was a lot more prevalent of having younger women involved with older men and that being completely normalized. And then in the past probably 20 to 30 years, we've started seeing a big pushback about that. I have yet to really see as much of a pushback when it comes to young men being depicted with older women, because a lot of the time people try to pass it off as like, well, it's a rite of passage. It is boys being boys. It is a part of the coming of age experience for a man. And I'm like, hey, they're still victims. Like it doesn't, the gender dynamics here don't influence the age dynamics as deeply as I feel.
I mean, because take that scene and flip it. And I think all of us would be like, this is very uncomfortable. If a young girl went into like an older protagonist's room, like an 18-year-old girl, and the man is like, take your towel off, we'd be like, hey, whoa, this is scary. Right. But it's on purpose. Like this isn't a like accidental thing that Cuarón did, because I would argue that like Luisa represents a standard of government, an idealistic mindset because Tenoch and Julio represent the two classes in Mexico at the time of this societal change, right? And so obviously Tenoch is the upper class and Julio is the lower class. And I think by having it be her that's like kind of using them for her ideals, it's almost like a European mindset that's come into this country and is like trying to help this country develop. And she's like goading the upper class to like follow her and her thing, right? But they like, Tenoch fucks it up and immediately comes or whatever. And it's almost like that's representative of like the elites focusing on their desires over what was needed to sort of to sort of meld these two ideas. But yes, that is very interesting, Parker. That was definitely on my mind upon a rewatch.
Sure.
I mean, I also think about how they objectify her from the minute they meet her. Like, it's not like there is a power dynamic for sure. And like she springs on him, and it is definitely strange and uncomfortable and awkward in that moment. But it's also like, there's a reason that she later is like, it was a mistake to sleep with either of you. She's like, but like, for me, I don't view Luisa as a predator in this moment at all. She comes across to me as someone who is suffering. She's scared. She's dying. And she's, her relationship is falling apart. I'm not saying that this is like, no, I think it was great.
Totally. And again, like that's where I
thought it was hot.
But like, I'm curious, Parker, because you say you rub against this a little bit.
it's a trope that I have issue with, but the qualifier that I always have with it, that the measuring stick I held this film up against is, does the film glorify this behavior?
Right.
Is it supposed to be tantalizing? Is it supposed to be aspirational? Right.
Right.
And I don't think it is, which is where I land with like, okay, I think I can understand where this is coming from.
Yeah.
It's just something that I wanted to bring up because it is a topic that I think gets brushed under a lot, where like, both in real life and in film, if it is a high school aged boy getting with an older woman, Adam Sandler made an entire movie about that, you know, and it's like, he's, getting the high fives and everybody thinks, oh, wow. But if it's a girl, then it's horrifying, as it should be. Right. And so where I land with it is, okay, is the narrative of the film glorifying this thing, or is it showing it for what it is, of being kind of pathetic and kind of silly and kind of gross? And I think the movie does a good job of that.
I think
it is awkward and bumbling. And to all the points that you made, Max, like it is somebody dealing with grief in a very unhealthy way.
Right. Well, and like they're all being extremely unhealthy about the entire situation.
Right. And I really liked what you said, Max, that like, and I think I honestly, not until this rewatch that I like noticed that it's like, it's the boys trying to act older and it's her trying to act younger, which is, but it's not good. Like the film actively tells you like these mindsets aren't good. Like it's not good for an older woman to try and be like these younger boys, and it's not good for these younger boys to try and be like older men. Like, and I think the film actively tells you like, this is a mistake. This whole all of them doing this, like, sure, they grew from it, they had these experiences, but like it led to issues and it wasn't good.
Because from here, there's like, because Julio sees this happen.
What a shot! The Diego Luna's on top of Maribel and Verdú, and he he comes really quickly, and then it's a slow pan over.
The pan is really great.
Gael Garcia Bernal is in the door frame, like a kid who just walked into his parents' room, to say, "I threw up."
Yeah, and then he heads out to the pool. The swimming pool full of leaves is great. And the narrator's like, "You only felt this way once before," and talks about again a past moment that he's reflecting on.
He caught his mom on his godfather's lap.
Yes,
and made him feel weird.
Made him feel weird, and it doesn't really specify what he was feeling, but it's but because he doesn't really know. And then Tenoch comes out, and
just like, hey man, I want to go for a swim in this.
Yeah, he's like, hey, do you want to swim?
Brain eating algae infested pool.
He's like, there's leaves. I do like this though, where he's like, there's leaves in the pool. And he's like, we can clean that up, and he cleans up a little bit, and then Julio's like, no, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. Like, just immediately is like, we're gonna do this. Tenoch lets him win. They're naked.
These two boys love to be naked around each other, and
I will say this, something that to bring back Fast Times.
Good.
Just mention so this is something that comes up a lot. This is why Fast Times comes up so much, is because Amy Heckerling's whole thing was like, if the woman is going to be naked, we need to see the man's penis, because a man gives up nothing by us showing us his ass, by showing us 100%. His chest, and women give up a lot all the time in movies. And I will say, I do wish there was. Obviously it's like, you get an X rating. That's how it goes. Yeah. But like, I do wish there was more readiness to be like, and here is a penis in a sex scene, because we only really see them in like from the shower and when they're swimming, but they do show.
Yeah. So. There is something so like, which I think I agree with that wholeheartedly, but there is something so soul crushing. I mean, it's normal, right? Mm-hmm. But just about seeing a limp penis, just a non-erect, gross limp
crushing
penis.
About that.
I mean, because it's like, as an actor, you don't want to be like, and now everyone gets to see me not hot. Like it's just like, it's so vulnerable, which is why I agree that it's very vulnerable. I think if you're going to make a woman do that, then now you have to show us it's just your limp penis.
The idea of someone being like seeing a limp penis and being like, oh.
I mean, every time I see
it, it's devastating.
Just being like,
there's so
that's such a shame to see.
Yeah,
you just don't. You don't.
Really hate to see it. Hate to see it.
I do find it very interesting with this scene specifically. I think it's a great scene, and I love the fact that like it's it's such a juxtaposition to the pool masturbation scene of like
and
that
the
is a
earlier
scene
race.
Right. It's like, okay, so this is and the earlier race, absolutely. It's like, okay, this visual metaphor of pool can represent several different things. And I love that of like it is both a place of bonding but also competition. It is about like they are constantly strutting for her the entire movie, and they're strutting against each other before she ever comes into the picture, right?
Yes.
All of this stuff. And I love that this is the fracturing point, is we come back here and Tenoch lets him win. And he knows it and he calls him on it.
Yeah, because previously Tenoch beat Julio and tells him like your issue is you start off too quick and then like you gas out before we end. This always happens. And then this time Julio wins, and Julio immediately is like
you let me
fucking let me win.
Yeah. He's like, I don't need your pity. Mm-hmm.
But this is where Julio's like, by the way.
Yeah. Because he comes back up and he's like, you let me win. And it's just, there's so much of this like boiling under subtext of he's just like, I don't need you patronizing to me. I don't need you giving me a pity victory when you just fucked the girl we both have been after this whole time. He's like, so yeah, you know what? I'm going to kick you. While I'm down, I'm going to kick you.
And he says that he had sex with his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this next scene when they're in the bedroom. I mean, just like talk about incredible acting from both of them. But it's two sides of it's two sides of the coin. Where you have Diego Luna doing this very like aggressive acting, and then Gael Garcia Bernal is doing this very vulnerable.
He's very
soft.
Sensitive in this moment.
I this is what I wrote down about.
He feels like a little like a younger boy. Like he feels like he's like, I don't know.
He's been chastised, you know.
Yeah. There, so you can get to it, Max. But,
no, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so they go into the hotel room and it's like nighttime.
Well, real quick, the lead-in that I love is that the narrator comes back in and mirrors it back. And he's like, there was only one other time Tenoch felt this way, and it's when he found out that his father had been selling bad corn to the poor.
Right.
And that they had to leave for 8 months. You know?
Yeah. So then they go into their bedroom. I think they go out again, right? They go out to dinner.
Yeah, they go out and it's just really quiet.
There's dinner,
Luisa
and
notices that things are different.
The narrator says that Luisa feels like it's her fault, and she's already decided how she can fix this. And we'll follow up with that.
The most man thing I've ever seen. They go back to in this great white shot. They go back to their hotel rooms, and Julio goes into his and Tenoch's room immediately, and Tenoch follows after. This is the most teenage boy thing I've seen. Follows after
Luisa's
Luisa.
like,
and she's like, turns around. She's like, good night, Tenoch. And he's like, and he like turns and goes in. And Julio's like, I thought you were gonna go sleep with her. And it's like, yeah, because that's such like I think a teenager in general, maybe or just like young adult, maybe not just men, but like well, we had sex and now we're together, right?
Yeah.
Like, I thought you want me to, I thought I was your boyfriend. It's like, no, you just had sex, man. That's okay.
Yeah. And so Julio immediately negs him about this and is like, I thought you were going to sleep with Luisa.
And then this scene, man.
Yeah.
And then they're sitting there and you can tell it's been festering in Julio. And he's like, I had sex with your girlfriend. And Tenoch is like, what? And then he's like, yeah, I had sex with your girlfriend. And at first, Julio's like throwing it in his face. Mm-hmm. But then you can tell that there's a real... what I wrote down is that there's a difference in how they both describe having sex with each other's girlfriends. So Tenoch jumps to anger and he's asking him all these questions like, when did this happen? How did this happen? What underwear was she wearing? Because it's like the spiral thing of like, you're asking for details that you don't want. And there's no point in asking them because it's only going to make you feel worse. But with every single one, you're like, I have to know it all so I can freak out properly about this.
Yeah.
And Julio... you see it in his face. He's crying. He's on the verge of tears where it starts out spiteful and vengeful. And then he's just like full of regret that he's like, you can tell that it's been eating him up. And he's like, I shouldn't have done it. And I'm sorry. And it's terrible. And it was bad. And there's a moment where he turns around and you see that he's got tears in his eyes and he like feels bad about it. Whereas like, jumping forward a little bit, when Tenoch tells Julio that he slept with his girlfriend, there is no regret. There is just, I want to hurt you. And he apologizes, but I don't even really think Tenoch regrets it.
No.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Julio does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love, I wish
I do love the line where he's like, you had sex with her, and I brought you fucking comic books from Lake Tahoe, and I'm like, that's great.
That's really good.
When I saw that line, I was like, that's a very Jose line. I feel like Jose was like, yeah, fuck that.
I wish I'd
be so mad, man.
Like,
I brought someone comic books and that'd be terrible.
Yeah, that's pretty upsetting. That's pretty devastating stuff.
But I like that he gets that dig in.
Yeah.
Like, you just found out your best friend had sex with your girlfriend, and you're like, I brought you fucking
After
comics,
all I did for you.
You asshole.
You comic books from Lake Tahoe, reminding you of their age. Parker, what were you gonna say?
Oh, just the I love the narrator's line about how Julio is revealing information to build a less painful truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that like, all that Tenoch wanted, like you said, he's just digging and digging and digging. And Julio is conceding as much information as he can to try and damage control what he's done. And to try and be like, okay, this happened, but it's not as painful as you think. And like hiding details that come out later. He's like, yeah, we did it a lot. We did it all the time. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. It's a really great scene. Yeah. So noticing tension, Luisa, as they're driving, is like, hey, Julio, your dick's hard now too.
Yeah.
Show me, introduce me. And then she like jumps
Please,
back in.
I'd like to meet him.
Yeah, I'd like to meet him. I'd like to meet him.
And that gentleman.
And Tenoch is like, fuck this, pulls over, runs away, briefly tries to get a glimpse into the car on the tree.
Yeah.
And then
he's like, I fucking hate you guys, runs away, and then he's like, wait.
Trying to get a look, and then he sits down and pouts.
There's something about Diego Luna with like still baby fat on his face.
Yeah.
That's just adorable.
Yeah.
You know?
He's a very cute young man.
Yeah.
Julio once again finishes very quickly. And then
also both times, sorry.
Oh yeah.
They're immediately apologetic. Just like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's so matronly on her part of like just cradling them, and
fucking Tenoch like calls her like mom.
Oh yeah, he does.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah,
but not in like a sexy way, like in like a weird way. Because he's like, after he comes, he's like, oh mommy, but not like in a, you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
I don't know.
Think about. I mean, it also
that way.
It also ties in. You know, he called the nanny mama as well when he was a boy. Like it's still like there's this thing of like Tenoch as, you know, looking for a mother figure in a sense, in a way, man child, if you will.
Sabrina Carpenter just released that song. Perfect timing.
About this movie.
I wish there would be more songs about Tu Mamá También. That'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
I also didn't know what the title meant until this movie.
Yes, it's great.
And then that was a great reveal. It got to be a reveal for me. Yeah. I will let you know that I do need to go pretty quick.
Oh, right.
No, it's fine. But I can go until 2 my time.
Okay.
And then if you guys are still going, I'll just head out and you guys can wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, just letting you know. So because I don't want to rush you, Jose. I want you to have time to talk about this. So she comes out and she talks to him for a bit. She's like, what, you thought we were going to be together? She's like, I shouldn't have done this. This is a terrible idea. And then he reveals that he's had sex with Julio's girlfriend. Mm-hmm. When does he reveal that?
While they're driving.
While they're driving. Mm-hmm. Okay, he's right.
Like, Julio, me
because
too.
He reveals this and then kind of comes to blows and they're, you know, and then Luisa
spits on the window.
On the window. Right. That's when that is. And then Luisa's like fed up. She's like,
well, it's because she's trying to get them to stop. She's trying to get Julio to stop, like trying to break into the car, and he shoves her. And she's like, fuck you. I'm done.
Yes.
Like, oh my God, I'm so sick of you. She has a line where she's like, I should have known. Deal with children. You'll end up changing diapers.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Good takedown. And she's kind of like, oh, you both come after like 10 seconds. She's like, you're both terrible in bed. Mm-hmm. And she's like, you're probably want to fuck each other. She has a very good line of saying that as well. I can't remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the way she says it is so good. Mm-hmm. And then she walks away. And they go after her. And yeah, what do we have to say about this?
It's like, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just, I do find it interesting how like tenuous this alliance is between the two of them. Like they are still so hyped up on their own testosterone and ready to kill each other. But they're like, all right, fine. I won't kill you right now. You won't kill me right now. Let's go get her. Yeah, let's just fix this as much as we can. It feels so patched together to the point that like it's very interesting when you get to the end of the movie because there's a very obvious event that occurs that you could point to as being the thing that like breaks apart the friendship.
Yeah.
But I kind of think it's here. I think here is where it really, there's no salvaging it anymore, you know?
Right.
And I think they both know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and who is it that talks to them later? So, okay, so they get to the beach. So she's like, here are the rules. You will not talk. You will not fight. You are going to get me to the beach. Like she lays down.
I'm not having sex with either of you anymore. We're like,
Right. Which is interesting with what you were saying earlier, Jose, of like, if, you know, she symbolizes this elite, like being like, we're going to live by my rules now. Like,
yeah. Well, so, I mean, really quick, there's her status as a European immigrant is like there's a historian, Claudio Lumnitz, who talked about in relation to this film that like in Mexican culture, the European woman often represents like aspiration and alienation. So it's like sort of an ideal that's out of reach for the majority. And so her being like, I will decide when you do this is like almost like, again, like representative of this class divide of like this idea, this like European influence on Mexico during this time of like, guys, we're trying to help you become an affluent country. We are going to decide how you run it. And then ultimately, you know, what happens. But like, I think it's a really interesting representation there.
Definitely. Yeah. So they drive and the narrator reminds us they don't know where they're going. Saba's directions were bad.
Yeah.
They just kind of pull off into any dirt road, get stuck for the night. And I genuinely was like, I know there's a beach at some point, but I don't know when they get there.
Yeah.
So I was like, like this isn't going to be good for like the relations with Luisa.
Yeah.
You know, but I love the reveal of the water when she gets out and runs over the hill, and it's the gorgeous beach.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, like it is really great. And I mean, what's the fisherman's name who comes over?
Oh boy,
I want to say is it Chuy? I had the subtitles on. Is it?
Let's see.
I don't recall off the top of my head.
Chuy,
yeah, right. And them arriving and being like fried fish, and I was like, oh, this rocks. Like this is turning out to be a really great trip. Like I was like excited for that. It's like, this is great. I was like, wow, fried fish. They give them a tour, and I love that moment when they're like, oh, there's a great beach over here. It's great for swimming. And they're like, what's it called? And she's like, Heaven's Mouth. And the way that those two play it, of like looking at each other and being like,
holy shit.
And that moment breaks my heart because it's the one moment where they kind of pull back the fracture. It's like, oh, they are still friends. They could still be friends.
But the rest of the film until the end is them kind of desperately trying to convince themselves that they can salvage it.
Yeah.
And the tragedy is that it's like they both know in their heart that it's over.
Well,
it's
and
broken.
is it Chuy or is it Luisa who's like, you're still friends? Like, look at you two. You're still friends.
I think it's Luisa.
I think it's Luisa when they're drinking, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's later. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, like, I mean, do we have anything more? They get back to the beach. The pigs tore up the camp.
Yeah, pigs tear up the camp and they chase them off or whatever.
Pigs tear up the camp.
Yeah.
Was pooping in the tent. Uh-oh.
Feral pigs. It's a real thing, guys.
Whoa. I love the moment. Also, the moment that really got me is when Luisa is swimming with the daughter, and she's like carrying the daughter and letting her float. And is like, oh, you're a corpse, like you're float, like corpse float. And she's like, oh no, she's dead. And like, that really got me of like watching her with this, because I know something's going on, and tying it into death in that moment.
And like her mother being like, do you have children? You're so good with them. Like you're so good with kids.
And her kind of non-response to that. Like all of this is so good. And then we get that, you know, when they drop them back off with the camp and stuff, and then they, you know, the narrator comes back in and it's like Chuy and his wife, like they get displaced by a luxury hotel that is built, and they try to make it work for an amount of time, but he ends up back at the hotel they try to make it work as like boat tours, but then a tourism company comes in and takes the boat tours over, and then he ends up as a janitor at the hotel. Like, just devastating little
just
color
terrible.
on top
I mean,
of everything else, you know, just like, and also here's this.
Yeah.
And ties back into what we were talking about earlier. And then we get to, Jose, this is your favorite scene in the movie.
Yes.
They're drinking.
Yes. So they're having what is a staple of beachside communities in Mexico. I remember a lot of these places in Puerto Vallarta, of just like at a little like beachside bar, and they're drinking and they're having a good time and they're joking about having sex with each other's girlfriends or whatever, more than just once. And then Julio says, you know, "Y tu mamá también." And he's like, and I had sex with your mom as well, which is what, you know, the film's title means, and your mom as well. And so they like joke about it or whatever. And was it true? Maybe, because she kind of really likes him. So
Yeah.
maybe they did have sex.
And what really gets me about the scene is the manic laughter that they are doing that is fueled by their drunken state, but also just by, like we're saying, this kind of manic attempts at salvaging this friendship of like the way that Tenoch is laughing about all of these things and being like, oh, sure. Like, yeah, why wouldn't you? Like, great. And they are talking about this. And she's like, see, you're still friends, but it feels so hostile. The entire, like, it feels so fragile and hostile, that entire scene.
Well, because you just know the minute they sober up, it's done.
Yeah, it's like over. This is the last good night they're gonna have.
And then continuing to call out to Chewie and being like, "Hey, don't you think blowjobs are great?"
Yeah,
and like, I love all the people at the other table who are just so sick of them, which is so obviously like,
which is like, because it's guys. Like they're tourists. They're tourists who are here, and those guys are locals, and they're like, "Fuck these guys," you know? These really fucking two young guys and their Spanish mom.
Well, so I mean, that's the thing, Barker. Your review was like, I just know that these guys were sick of these three drunk morons.
Yeah.
For me, it's also like when they all start kissing, I just feel like they're probably like, yeah, I mean, I guess
another weekend in this beautiful seaside community.
Damn Europeans.
Yeah, and so then my favorite scene happens where they get shots of mezcal. And then she's like, wait, I'm going to play a song. And she goes up to this jukebox. She's like, give me a letter. And I think, I can't remember who says B. And then she's like, give me a number. One of them says 13. She plays B13. And it's one of my favorite songs ever. I've listened to the song a million times because my mom would play it as I was growing up. It's Si No Te Hubieras Ido by Marco Antonio Solís, or as he's often referred to, El Buki. He was part of a Mexican group called Los Bukis, and then he broke off and had a very successful solo career. He's a staple of Mexican music, and this song is a huge deal. And I think this movie definitely is influential in bringing it back into the zeitgeist of Mexican, like the Mexican minds. But I've met him. He's a really nice guy. This singer, it was incredible. It was one of the best moments of my life to meet him, because I was like, I love your song, and Y Tu Mamá También. And like, again, like, as I think if you're someone who is of Mexican descent, you're like, this is great. I think if you're not, you're like, this song still fucking rocks.
It's a good song.
Yeah, it's a good
great song. And she turns towards the camera and she starts dancing.
It's fantastic.
And it's I cannot remember the film, but this is directly inspired by a French film that Cuarón watched, where a woman danced.
I think it might be.
I think so.
I think it is.
It's one of the French New Waves.
It's a French New Wave film. Yeah. And he was like, this stood out with me. Like, it stuck with me when I saw it, and I was like, we got to do this. And it's the only time that a character looks at the camera in this film. And she just like kind of slowly dances towards us.
It's the cover of the Criterion edition.
Yeah, and she gets to the boys and they stand up, and then the three of them have a challengers. Again, I always say that this movie ran so challengers could walk.
I like challengers.
I like challengers too, but it's not in anywhere near. Anyway,
I think it's doing something completely different. Okay, it's fine.
And the three of them dance together, and it's sensual and strange, and then they go to their room.
And that whole scene's a oneer. Like them at the shack through the dance looking like that is all. It's like a 5-minute oneer. It's great. Yeah.
And then they go to the room, and she goes down on both of them, and then they kiss.
They start kissing.
The two boys kiss. Two boys kiss.
Boys kissing. Boys kissing.
Boys kissing.
Whoa.
Parentheses. Queer
Gay.
question mark.
Queer.
Queer. Gay?
Gay question mark?
Gay?
Guys, is it gay if there's a woman going down on both of you?
Guys, is it gay to kiss your homie while you're both getting fellatioed by a woman? It is, and it's this sort of this whole film. I think when I talked about it, I talked about how there's this film is sort of representative of like homoeroticism and like bisexuality and like some sort of like this fear of like giving into it, and then this is this big moment of where they kind of just are like, yeah, and I think it's kind of implied that more things happened between them.
Totally.
I don't think it ended at the kiss. I think they did other stuff.
They wake up tangled in each other the next morning.
Yeah, and they can't even like look at each other, which is also
throws. Oh my god, like
he throws up.
Tenoch throwing up.
It's such like it's so representative of this machismo that is prevalent in Mexican society, of this fear that like even if you know you are bisexual, even if you know you are gay or queer or anything, there's this sort of this machismo has been ingrained in Mexican culture, and it's like you're afraid to like, it's like you did nothing wrong. You guys just gave in to like these feelings that you've had, but they're both like, no, I can't even look at this guy. No, that was the alcohol or whatever. And it's like, I don't know. I think Cuarón, and especially for when this film came out, like that scene was talked about in Mexican society because it was like, haha, you believe kissing your homie? I would never. I would not want to kiss my homie. I would not want to kiss his luscious lips. I would never do that. He's so handsome, And it's like, I don't know. It's just that moment is just, yeah.
Really.
They
special.
Wake up the next morning, are disgusted with one another, like rapidly leave. Like, hey, I gotta get back.
Julio's like, I gotta go, and Tenoch is like, I gotta go, and Luis is like, I'm staying here a few days.
Stay here.
You're gonna show me some more stuff.
Yeah, and so I think her ultimate decision to seek solace in her final days in rural Mexico, away from this urbanized bubble, to going back to this, how they all represent different classes and all this kind of stuff, like that symbolizes a rejection of the privilege that they both represent. And I think it's the Cuarón's brothers' message to the audience that maybe the dream of a better Mexico is lost already before it even started.
Yeah.
Because she chooses to not even go with either one of them. And I think that to them is like, yeah, the election happened. Yeah, things are different. Yeah, we maybe have maybe things will get better. But then immediately after Vicente Fox became president, there were scandals, right? Even when the thing ended, it was like there were already. And so I think it's them kind of being like, maybe it doesn't get better than this,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very, very poignant ending. But yeah, so they go, narrator comments about how it was just a very quiet trip. And when they got back, their girlfriends came home, broke up with both of them.
Yeah. Do you know what that reminded me of, Jose? Is when you and I went out to Colorado.
Yeah.
In March of 2020, and the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
And we went to a concert, and then the day after that concert, it was like the rest of that band's tour was canceled, and school was canceled, and everything was canceled.
And we were forced
and we had to drive together all the way home back to Utah. And it was like one of the most quiet drives of all time.
Because we were both like, what's going to happen?
Well, and also we both had sore throats from having sung and screamed at the concert.
And it was like a zombie film where we didn't want to reveal to each other.
We both were just
that
driving.
We had it.
we later confirmed that we both were driving just like terrified that we had it. No,
I was actually frightened that I was like, how do I tell Max I think I have COVID?
And I did the same thing too.
And I remember dropping him off and being like, well, I'll see you, buddy. And then I drove home and was like, I gave Max COVID, He's going to die because.
And so when the narrator was like, it was a long, quiet drive, I was like, yeah.
Yeah, and then we get the reveal. The narrator tells us that they drive back and that she stayed at the Coves and called Jano to finally say goodbye, and they stop being friends. And then a year later, just on a whim, they run into each other in Mexico City, and they go get coffee. They catch a ride.
There's such a good line there. The narrator's like, one of them finally proposed going to get coffee, and Tenoch decided that it would be much less uncomfortable to actually get coffee than to keep making excuses not to.
Right.
Yes.
Like they finally reach a point where it's like, let's just get this out of the way.
And I think Tenoch asks Julio about Luisa. Mm-hmm. And Julio's like, she died of cancer. a
Well,
month
yeah,
after the trip.
yeah,
And that's when you, as the audience, if you weren't incredibly smart like Parker, you're like, wait,
No.
what? And then, like Max said, it reframes every
it does.
moment that has
Yeah,
happened up until that point. I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, oh my God, that's why she's crying. She doesn't give a fuck about the affair. She's crying because she's like, I just found out I'm going to die, and this asshole's telling me he cheated on me.
Yeah.
yeah,
And then it just, oh God, it's gut wrenching. And again, because
yeah,
it's shot almost documentary, like it's like, no, she died.
yeah.
It's
This
like, no,
real
Maribel
person
Verdú is
died.
out there and she's safe, But and then she knew the whole time, and they make an
Yeah,
excuse to Tenoch is like, I gotta get going, and then he picks up the check though,
Hmm.
right? Which is
Julio does. Yeah, he does pick up
yeah,
the check.
yeah. Is it Julio or Tenoch that picks up the check?
It's
Julio
Julio. Yeah,
says, "Check,
yeah.
please."
Tenoch
Yes,
leaves, and
yes,
so
that's
yeah,
right.
Julio's like, I've got
And
this.
Julio, of course, Julio's yeah.
Yeah,
But also, I will say that this movie is one of the few that can get away with ending with "check, please." I feel like a lot
yes,
of movies
Hmm.
really try, but this
yeah,
movie it worked for. I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
this is
yeah.
good.
But the narrator reveals that they
They never
make
saw each
plans
other
because
again.
they say like, oh, we'll
Yeah.
catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll see you
We'll see
around.
I'll
We'll see you
call
around.
you.
Hmm.
And the narrator's like, they never would.
They
And
never
that
spoke
was it.
again.
And it was the gut punch of these like two lifelong friends
Yeah,
but I mean, who had these like insecurities that were building up, and then this big moment in their life led to it, and then it's done, and that's
yeah,
just life.
yeah,
And then my favorite line from the film is that where the narrator says, "Life is like the foam, so we must give ourselves to the sea."
yeah,
And that's, and in Spanish, it's la vida es como la espuma, por eso hay que darnos al mar, which is just great. I'm gonna get it tattooed on me. It's
Hell yeah.
incredible. It's yeah. I mean, it's just like a reminder of like life is fickle, and
Hmm.
we gotta just live it,
Yeah.
because you
yeah,
never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah.
It's a
it's
great
great.
ending. Max, do I need to wrap up with Jose solo? Do you need to
I
dip
think
out?
so. Yeah,
Okay,
I need to
cool.
head, but this has been lovely.
Well, yes.
And I'm excited to hear where you guys land. See, this
Yeah.
is what's great,
Yeah.
Parker. I've figured out the hack to leave before
No,
having to
you have
make a
to
decision.
you have to give me your point vote right now. Like which the
No, no,
Yes.
criteria?
no. Okay.
Historical and technical relevance.
Kane takes it.
Kane. Okay.
Um,
How well is it doing what it's trying to do?
I think it's doing. I think it's doing.
Come on, come on,
And then I throw up.
come
Yeah.
on.
It's doing it really well. I'll give the point to Tu Mamá También.
Okay, great.
Yes.
How much do I like?
Yeah,
Do I like the
yeah.
movie?
Do you like the movie? You're connecting with it.
Yeah, I'd say I like it. Where I stand now, I like it as much as I like Citizen Kane. I think I like both movies very similarly. I
Yeah.
think this movie is just more watchable, obviously, for recency bias reasons. Um, but I'd say I like them the same amount.
All right.
Which yeah. So there you go.
Okay, we'll riddle out the rest, but I just need to
Wonderful.
get your votes in.
Yes, of course. Jose, thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course.
And thank you everybody for listening. And I can't, this is such a surprise. I'm so excited.
Yes.
We're not going to tell you until the end. We're going to make you listen to the
Yeah.
episode. I'm not
Okay.
telling you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll listen. Now I have a reason to listen to my own podcast without seeming like a tool. Okay. All right. Bye, everybody.
All right, buddy,
bye.
Yep, yep, yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Now that that guy's gone, we can actually have fun.
Ah, thank God. Woof. Yeah, this ending, it really is just such a huge gut punch. And even having kind of like thought that it was cancer, the reveal still hit me in a big way of just like knowing that. And you're just like you said, it recontextualizes everything.
Which I think is like, I think a lot of films try to do that of like
Yeah.
they save the thing for the end, and then you go like, oh well, that makes me. But like this film doesn't show you those moments again to be like, remember
Right.
this, which I think a lot of films do when they have like a final reveal of like, well, let's show you the scenes again because you forgot.
Yeah.
It just like
it's-
tells you, and it makes you be like, oh. And I remember when we watched this in my film styles class, there was a lot of kids in it who hadn't seen it. And the silence in that room after that, like not even breathing could be heard. It was
Yeah, I'll
deafening.
bet.
And like when the professor turned on the lights, everyone was just like, oh, like
Yeah.
shit. Yeah, it's incredible and it's powerful and it
Hmm. Totally.
tragic.
Absolutely. And it's so like that moment of the narrator saying that like they never talk again. I came across some reviews online from people on Letterboxd and also just like professional reviews that I thought like fundamentally misunderstood this movie
Yeah.
because like they were like, oh well, like they should have kept that part of themselves hidden. Like that was the thing
Yeah.
that broke their relationship is like their gay experience
Yeah.
together. And it's like, no, like what
No.
broke their relationship is that these guys treated everybody else in the world like shit, but
Yeah.
convinced themselves they would never treat each other that way. And the
Yes.
second that they find out that all
Yes.
of that is a lie, that's what breaks it apart.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's the whole thing that
Yeah.
is load bearing in their relationship is now
Yeah.
gone. And
Yeah.
this drunken stupor they go through of like giving into, letting go of their inhibitions and realizing this parts in themselves, like you said earlier, is just a last ditch attempt to try and pretend
Yeah.
everything's okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely like I don't even know what else to say. Yeah, I think that's the brilliantly put. That I think anyone who views it as that way like fundamentally missed it.
Just like I was
Yeah.
shocked to see takes like that on Letterboxd. I was like, did we watch the same
Yeah,
movie? Like, what are
no.
you talking about?
Yeah,
But yeah, no, great movie. I'm so glad you brought it.
of
And
course.
thank you for introducing me to this because I really did enjoy it.
And again, like I think this whole like ambiguous resolution that happens at the end of the road trip, it just like sort of it underscores Cuarón's like larger critique of Mexican society. And like, yeah, the journey had moments of like liberation and self-discovery, but
Mhm.
like it ultimately like reinforces the structures that end up dividing the characters. Like
Totally.
it's a sort of disillusionment of like where at the end it didn't really matter how much
Right.
growth and happened. And it's just like the film is it's just complicated. It's full of like layers that go beyond the surface. Like I think if you watch it and focus on the surface, still a good movie. When you watch it and actually dig deeper, you're like, this is incredible. It's about like despair, growing pains, existentialism, but like it it's also about class divide and it's
Mhm.
about in inequalities and systemic inequalities and discrimination and it's phenomenal. It's very much, I think, a timeless exploration of class,
Mhm.
privilege, and like human connection. This is like fundamentally a movie about the human condition, you know,
Mhm. Yeah,
and I think that's great.
it's a beautiful way of putting it, and I completely
Yeah.
agree on all fronts. Okay, let's hop into
Yeah.
our criteria then. We kind of sped run max, but
Yeah.
starting at the top, historical and technical relevance.
I mean, I'm biased, right? To me,
Sure.
I would say that this is like this does what Citizen Kane does for American society, for I
Mm,
think the Mexican audience, where it is a film about the political landscape and the Mexican identity and like fundamentally like how our society runs and how it's been running.
yeah.
So I think like I I give it to Tu Mamá También because I think it says what it wants to say in a great way, or like a
Yeah.
an historical, yeah,
Yeah, I can absolutely respect that perspective. I think just being so new to the film,
yeah,
I don't have that kind of context around it,
yeah,
and so
no,
like
yeah,
I totally see where you're coming from. I think I'd probably personally still give it the point to
yeah,
Kane just because
no,
it's
yeah,
Citizen Kane, but
yeah, right,
it's been fascinating. Like, because like I cards on the table, I enjoyed the film, and just because of like my own personality and some of the things I've experienced in my own life, that thing that I brought up of like the disparity between young men and older women in media is
yeah,
like it's kind of like it's a big personal cross for me, I
yeah,
think, in a big way. And like
yeah,
walking out of the film, I had a more bitter taste in my mouth about
yeah,
that. And
yeah,
what I will say is that like doing this conversation with you and hearing all of the context and the research you brought, like I already liked the film, but you've warned me on it in a big
yeah.
way.
Well,
So
I'm
thank you so
glad.
much for
Yeah, of
bringing that.
course.
But yeah, I think I'd probably give that point to Kane. How well it's doing what it's trying to do, though, I think I'd probably give it to this. I think
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think
yeah,
it just it feels so deliberate in every choice that it's making
Yeah.
and like fully executes. Like you said, there are so many other films who try to pull off the
Mm-hmm.
end twist reveal, and this one nails it. This one does it
Yeah.
in such a like I this may sound like hyperbolic, but genuinely like it felt of a level of like Christopher Nolan's The Prestige, where immediately in
Yeah.
my brain is like, I need to go back and watch this whole thing again, you
Well,
know?
and to me, I think what's great is that I think like the first time I watched it, I didn't even think they were going to tell us what was happening. I thought
Yeah.
it was just like inconsequential. I thought
And
it was just
that's,
going to be like,
yeah.
yeah,
I got
she
about
found
halfway
out
through the
some.
movie and I was like, I don't think it matters.
Yeah, no, I
Nope.
genuinely thought like, oh no, Cuarón's not gonna like it
Yeah.
doesn't. It's just she's just sad, something's happening, whatever. And then
Yeah,
at
it's
the
just
end,
life.
it's like no, this, and you're like, I didn't even know there was a twist coming. I didn't
Yeah.
even know there was a mystery. That's great.
Totally. Yeah. It does such a good job of foregrounding the relationship between the boys that everything we've been given all the pieces of her story,
Mhm.
but are given a red herring that we are convinced it's
Yeah.
because her marriage is falling apart. And
Right.
like Max said, like she couldn't care
No.
less about
Yeah.
this, you know? Yeah, so I would agree. I think I fully assume you're giving the point to this as well
Yeah.
on that
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think you've done a marvelous job telling us everything about what this film means to you and how
Mhm.
well you connect with it. But any final thoughts on that particular criteria?
No, I mean, yeah, it's just great.
Yeah,
It's a great movie.
I think it's
Good
really
movie.
solid. And yeah, I think where Max is at, I think I like this more than I like Citizen Kane. I think this connects with me on more.
Yeah.
Like there is, as I'm sure you've heard me talk about, over the years
Yeah.
now, is like I just can't find an emotional way in on Kane. I respect the hell
No.
out of it as a
Yeah,
filmmaker, and I don't care about any of the characters.
I think I agree wholeheartedly with that. I think that is that I often, because whenever I see you guys post about another episode, it always just I start thinking about it, and I'm like, it is a great movie,
Yeah,
but I couldn't care less about him, you know?
totally.
And like again, like you said, yeah, I respect it as a filmmaker, but I'm like, I don't. There's no weight
Yeah.
to it for me,
And
you
like
know?
there are other like and people will bring up it's like, well, like you don't have to like a character. It's like, no, I
No,
don't
no,
like
no.
these characters.
Yeah,
I don't
right.
like these two boys at all, but
Yeah.
like I emotionally can connect with them. There
Yes.
is an interiority there
And
that is lacking for me in
I
Kane.
think, I mean, I hope that people by now have seen that both Diego Luna and Gael Garcia Bernal were in the Criterion closet, and
Mhm.
Gael Garcia Bernal had the great bit where he's like, when's the last time you were horny when you watched the movie? And he's like, you can't think of a time because movies don't make you horny anymore. And I'm like, I'm like, yeah, I mean, like, again, like we talked about sex and it's like stuff now, it's just like gratuitous, you know?
Yeah.
And I just feel like films need to get back to like if you're gonna include sex, you gotta have a reason for it.
Yeah,
You know?
make it sensual again, you know?
Yeah.
I agree. I completely
Not
agree.
just
Okay, so criteria, tallying up all those points, criteria says that this film is better
It's always
than
my favorite
Citizen
part.
Kane. Taking a step back, trying to put it
Yeah.
all down and look at it objectively, I want to leave this call entirely up to you. Of when you take a step back, when you try to look at this thing, is it better than Citizen Kane?
I mean, objectively is hard.
Yeah. Welcome to the show.
I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna say it is.
Okay, I can get behind that.
Say yes, it is.
I can absolutely respect that. Do you want to say it out loud? Do you want to give us the full sound clip?
Let me quiet my dog down real quick. Hang on.
We have to really make sure that we land this precisely and perfectly because this is a big moment. This is a big moment in the history of the podcast. It's a big moment in the history of cinema, I would even argue. If you can't tell, I'm not great on a mic solo. I've lost my co-host and I've lost my guest, and you guys are just here now, and I'm gonna ramble, and who knows if I'll keep this in or not. I haven't the slightest idea. Maybe there'll be a clean transition. If nothing else, this will be a nice thing for Max to come back to, is just lots and lots of Parker completely rambling by himself. And we're back.
Those Amazon delivery drivers, man.
Hey, they'll do it. They'll do it to you.
Just freak a dog out.
Hey, it happens.
Yeah, I think Tu Mamá También is better than Citizen Kane.
There we go. There you have it, folks. You heard it here first. Thank you again so much, Jose, for being here. It
Of
was
course.
wonderful having you. Hope to have you again.
I would love to come back. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you for letting me talk about a film that I love. That's about issues that are near and dear to me, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I always love an opportunity to find new film from people that I respect.
Yeah.
All right, then, listeners, wrapping up Solo. Next time, look forward. We will be watching 1980s Airplane, a very huge tonal shift from this week.
Good movie, though.
Good movie. I'm very excited to talk about it. All right. Well, take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.